Okay, everybody, so now we are to part two of England here, and what's really important here is we're going to see the slow but steady development of a constitutional style government. Still going to have a monarchy, but you'll find a lot of the influence on our government, believe it or not, will come from England despite our revolting from them. And it really goes through a series of kings and revolts and a civil war or two, and it all starts with James the First, who clearly has a magic wand and a ball or something. James the First was the king after Elizabeth. He was technically Elizabeth's cousin, kind of treated as a nephew. But what's important for him is because of his kingdom, he is able to unite England and Scotland. And probably the biggest thing that he's going to be really huge on will be the expansion of the exploration. Under him, you have the first full settlements in the New World under England, which is really, really important. However, despite dressing very, very fantastically with, yes, bows on his shoes, I challenge you to wear those tomorrow. He's going to be really big about the power of kings. He really felt that kings should have absolute power and rule by divine right. A quote that I have on the notes from him are, "The state of monarchy is the supremest thing on the earth, for kings are not only God's lieutenant on earth, but even by God himself they are called gods." So he kind of thought he was really, really important, and as a result, he gets very annoying. His major problem will be the Puritans. They are slowly gaining in strength, they are starting to gain powers in Parliament, and he is very nervous about them becoming like a force within the country. Now, yes, they're Protestant, but remember, they're Calvinists, and he sees them as a legitimate chance, as someone that can actually, mess with him. So he does a lot of things to possibly limit their power. He will start to forbid Puritans from holding certain offices. Many Puritans will find themselves in jail. As a result, not the Puritans, but a bunch of people feel that James has to go, and you have something called the Gunpowder Plot, made famous by one of their leaders, Guy Fawkes, in which a large cache of gunpowder is put underneath Parliament, in which they try to lure James there and blow him up. The plot was discovered, but James just used this to kind of feed into his paranoia. Um, it is because of James' persecution that many of the Puritans left here, which again I'm okay with because, once again, I've said before, those are my wife's direct ancestors, and without them, I don't have my children, so it's a bonus. Now, he does also attack some Catholics as well, because, why not? He's going to ban Jesuits. He will also blame the Catholics for the gunpowder plot. It really, really is crazy, but then he confuses people because he arranges a marriage between his son Charles and the Princess of Spain, and people are just not really liking him and starting to get turned off by the monarchy. Now, James is gone, and his son Charles II will then come into power. And Charles is, bad. No one really likes him. He comes in as a tense situation dealing with Parliament and the Puritans, and he's dressed and he's got the crazy hair. He's going to be, again, really big by the power of kings. He's constantly calling together and dismissing Parliament. That isn't really a good thing. Then he goes and marries the sister of Louis the 13th, who was a Catholic. That angers everyone. He's going after the Puritans again. That's angering everyone. And it's really just a matter of time. And it all really hits in 1640. As you see the picture on the right, he has the same approach to his power as his father. Kings are not bound to give an account of their actions, but to God alone. So that's definitely not really appreciated. But then Scotland rebels, and when Scotland rebelled, he needs money, and when he needs money, he's supposed to go to Parliament. Not only do the Scots rebel, then the Irish rebel. And he tries to go to Parliament. Parliament's not going to give him the money unless they actually get something in exchange, which they want him to pass a law that forbids the king from disbanding Parliament. So Charles tries to then arrest pretty much all of Parliament, and they will then break away and decide it's time to fight it out. And as a result, you get the English Civil War, which will be fought from 1642 to 1649. On the one side, you will have the Cavaliers. It's a great name. They are the royalists. They are the forces of King Charles. Then you have the Parliament, who is going to be referred to as the Roundheads, which is kind of weird, mainly because of their haircuts, because it was round. Now, the geography of the war, basically, early on, the Royalists will be in southern and western England, and the Parliamentarians will be in the east. Early on in the war, the Parliamentarians will basically get beat pretty soundly. If you see here, the Royalists are in purple, the Parliamentarians in blue, and you can see the Royalists in 1642, 1643, really doing very, very well. But as you see here, that's going to change. And that is going to change because of one man, and his name is Oliver Cromwell, who comes in and is going to basically change everything over. He is an outstanding military leader. He creates the New Model Parliament, also known as the New Model Army, in which he reorgs the army, and they become just much, much better. Better tactics, about the same weapons. Then the Scots, because remember, Charles has to fight them too, capture him, and in 1648, they're going to get a hold of Charles and really kind of end the fighting with massive, massive victories. Now you have a big deal in dealing with Charles himself. Charles is the symbol of the monarchy, and he needs to be dealt with. And so what they do is they put him on trial. They accuse him of ruling by divine right, which actually violated the Magna Carta. So even though it wasn't important, they used it when they needed to, and violating the rights of Parliament, which basically accused him of treason. This was actually covered by the media. And in the end, Charles was found guilty. He was sentenced to death, and on January 30th, 1649, he is executed, as you see by the arrow pointing to his head. This is absolutely remarkable. It's one of the first times in history, actually, a ruler is overthrown and executed by the people. Now, Oliver Cromwell takes over, and he's an interesting guy. He's, if Elizabeth is the most influential monarch in English history, which she really is. Then you have William, who kind of made England. Then really you could argue Oliver Cromwell. He refuses to take the title of king. Rather, he takes the title of Lord Protector of England because he really wants to establish a constitutional democracy, interestingly enough. He reconvenes Parliament on a number of occasions. He forms England into a commonwealth, but the problem is that the English weren't ready for this yet. They still kind of wanted a king, and most of them wanted him to be the king, whereas he didn't actually want to be the king. He tries to pass an actual constitution. It doesn't really work. So in the end, he ends up really ruling like a monarch. Religion was a big deal. He was very, very, very Puritan. He kicks the Jews out. I'm sorry. He's very, very Puritan, so he's okay with other Protestants. So he allows Jews back into England. They had actually been kicked out prior to that. However, being a very big Protestant, he is going to move on particularly Ireland. If you say Cromwell in Ireland today, it's basically a curse word. He's going to start the slow but sure land takeover of Ireland. He's going to move nobles into Ireland and basically give them all of the land. If you can see here by this map, land that is controlled that is 50 to 100% Catholic. You can see the Catholics control much of Ireland, and you had some Protestants up here. Now, by the end of by the beginning of the 1700s, the English will basically completely control this land, and we'll talk about some of the issues that will develop later on. Impact-wise, he set the tone for democracy that eventually will get there. He settles the Civil War and calms England back down, and also his moves into Ireland will be really big as well. But his son is terrible, so they kind of get rid of him, and basically Charles II, now the son, the second Charles here, will come to power and have to try to deal with Parliament. He's actually invited back to Parliament to become the king. He had fled to France during all of the chaos. One of his first things is that he felt that Cromwell was really a bad guy. So once again, you have another case in which his body was dug up, put on trial, and then his head put on display because he was also guilty of treason. I don't really know what the deal is with this, but whatever. Um, Basically, his goal was to try to rule with Parliament. The problem was is that when he came into Parliament and when he came into England, that there was lots of financial issues. Parliament was very reluctant to really approve anything of the king, and so it really doesn't work. So he starts to work around them. He will increase taxes on colonies. He'll go to war with the Netherlands and actually take New York from them, and doing things as a little bit too strong for them, if you will. Then he starts to take a hit when plague hits in 1665. You actually had 70,000 people die in just London itself, and then you get religious problems. He's very close friends with Louis XIV in France. He allows Catholics to hold office in the country, which people did not like. So Parliament responds by passing something called the Test Act, which bans Catholics. Um, he is going to try to think about challenging that, but he is going to die. However, the move to Catholicism is very strong. He actually converts to it on his death. His son, who is wonderful and blonde, as you can see here, I just love the garb here. I'm not sure I would be able to pull it off, but why not? Uh, you now go to the other son of Charles, the son of Charles I, James II. Immediately, James is going to try to act strong as a king, and what he is going to do is repeal the Test Act. He is going to embrace Catholicism, and Parliament is very, very scared that they're going to have another civil war on their hands. So what do? They are going to put a little letter into the daughter of James II, Mary, as you see there on the right. So she would actually end up being Mary II. To come and get rid of her dad because he's too Catholic and going to mess everything up. What helps is that her husband is the ruler of the Netherlands, William, the Prince of Orange. And they are going to show up with a huge navy and get ready to have a revolution. And when they show up, James freaks out, runs to France, and that is the end of that. And they will rule jointly from the late 1600s, early 1700s. Now, what's very important about William and Mary, aside from them having a college named after them, is dealing with a variety of issues. The first thing is the Irish. They will crush them. They will be very, very brutal, and you're going to see massive discrimination against the Irish by the English, which leads to many of the problems that we still see today. But what they really focused on was the creation of a constitutional monarchy through the writing of a constitution and something known as the Bill of Rights of 1689. And what you have here is this establishes a constitutional monarchy in which you do have a legislature which is elected by the people, and then the king, who is the executive, is hereditary. Some of the rights that were given to people and that were established is that the king is subject to the law of the land, so he must abide by laws. No Catholic can take the throne. The king can't raise an army without Parliament's consent. We have that. The Parliament must meet regularly. We have that. The king can't remove a law without Parliament's consent. Very, very interesting. And Parliament still controls the money. What they will also do, as you see a picture of William and Mary College in Virginia, will pass rights for the individual. The idea that you can petition to the government for change, the right of free speech, that there should be no excessive bails and fines, that there is no cruel and unusual punishment. Many of the laws that we have and rights that we have in this country today. And then he further expands the power of Parliament with the creation of the prime minister. The first prime minister was a man by the name of Robert Walpole, whose job was to kind of run the day-to-day activities of England and enforce the dictates of Parliament. And slowly but surely, what you're going to see is that really from this point on, there would be English kings. Okay, they will have a role, but they're going to share power jointly with Parliament. And then once you really get into the late 1800s under Victoria, the changeover will come, and then the royal family just kind of becomes more of a figurehead. So really an interesting change here, and this is really dramatic. This will drastically affect the United States of America. This is really our first move toward a democratic style country, and it's something else that despite the civil wars, England will be able to remain unified and strong. All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll talk about it then.